All right, everybody, if you are a web developer in 2016, 2017, or you are learning web development in 2016, 2017, there's so much noise out there on what technology's out there. What do I learn? What's the best stuff to learn? And so every year I try to really process through all year long. If I was going to learn all over again today, or if I was going to level up in an area, what would I tell people to learn? What would I tell people to choose as a level up technology to learn? So that's what this video is. It's one of my favorite videos all year long. I guess it's probably my most popular video as well. And hopefully you'll learn some great stuff. So starting from the very beginning, and then we'll go to front end, then we'll go to back end. What do you want to learn if you're a learning and growing web developer in 2016, 2017? Let's go ahead and start. As the very beginning, you're starting off, you need to learn basic front-end web development. And that really is HTML, CSS, and basic JavaScript. You'll pick a text editor. The best text editors out there these days are Atom.io, Sublime Text, and Brackets.io. Brackets is great for beginners. I feel like these are a little bit better as you get more comfortable. Sublime Text is the only one on here that charges. I think it's worth it, but Atom is also great. So you'll start off learning basic HTML, and very quickly you'll start adding CSS into that because they're kind of hand-in-hand interlinked. And then you'll learn your JavaScript fundamentals. You'll learn with JavaScript, how do I change HTML and CSS on the page in real time? Let's say a user clicks a button. I'm going to go change HTML, and I want to change the CSS. That's really where JavaScript is used in a basic level. And I used to say, hey, learn jQuery, but notice it's a different color now. I've done this new thing this year where I've changed things to a different color if you don't really necessarily need to know them anymore. So jQuery is this interesting thing. There's this world of developers who are really good at the design element, the HTML and the CSS, and then they use jQuery plugins to do some functionality. And that still is in existence, that is still around. People make fine salaries on that, support their families. There's kind of a salary cap you will hit, but for people who really like the design side of things, that might be where people want to stay. And so it's a legitimate skill set to just know HTML and CSS really well and know jQuery really well. However, you don't really have to know. This is the first year I'm saying you don't really have to know jQuery if you're not going to go into that niche. So basically, do the JavaScript fundamentals course. Got a link there. Everything that's blue is a link to videos I have out there for you. Do the JavaScript is weird and awesome course, and then possibly do the jQuery course. It's certainly not going to hurt you. Tons of companies still use jQuery. So you've got basic front end down. You're now officially hireable in the industry. So if you want to level up, you're going to go become a full-on front end developer, which is this orange road, or you're going to want to come down here to this green road and become a back-end developer. No matter which route you take, here's a couple things I want to point out that you want to learn along the way. These haven't changed since last year. But you'll basically want to learn how you set up a web host and FTP files on there. This is what you'll learn at first as a very, very beginner. You'll use FTP. It's the easiest way to get your HTML and CSS files onto your website. And then you want to learn basic terminal usage. Everybody's terrified of the terminal at first because it's black and you use commands that you type instead of commands that you click from a menu. Once you get over that fear, you're fine. It's not hard to use. Then you use that terminal to use basic SSH, and that will be the new and improved way that you get your files onto the server over FTP. But again, start with FTP if you're new. It is much easier. Then go SSH, and that basic SSH you learn will be allowed to teach you GitHub. You'll use SSH to get your files to GitHub as well. GitHub is where professional developers keep their code. It's a source code repository. It gives you full history, and you can revise back to any point in history and fix merges from other developers, all sorts of stuff. GitHub's a phenomenal tool. It's pretty much the standard for where professional developers keep their code. And then you want to learn how the client and server talk to each other somewhere along the road. Again, don't have to learn it all right away. I did 2 videos in a series that really help explain things that took me about 10 years to put together. Just kind of to really figure out some things that nobody really talks about to people who are learning web development. And then you want to learn about RESTful web services. Basically, get, post, put, and delete requests. How do you send information back and forth in a standard way from the client, which is the web browser, to the server? So these are not languages. These are not going to be as hard as learning CSS or JavaScript. These are little tiny skills you learn along the way that may take you everywhere from a couple hours to a day. So no, I don't want to zoom a page. All right, so you're kind of on the process. Let's say you want to become a front-end developer. You slowly start learning those things on the list I just went through. Here's kind of your level up list. If you want to level up from a basic front end, or you're already a front end developer, here's kind of where things have settled in 2016. So 2015-ish, towards the beginning of 2016, saw a lot of craziness in just React world and JavaScript frameworks. It was nuts. There was a new thing every day, and there's been a lot of settling that's really happened. So this is actually a lot shorter of a list than it used to be a year ago. So I'm really happy to bring the changes this year. I'm really excited about where it is. Basically, you want to learn ES 2015. They're the same thing. I mean, you'll use Babel as a standard to transpile that into ES5 code, because you probably still want to transpile it to ES5 code. That's a great thing to learn. It's not that hard. It's really not a lot. It's almost all syntax differences. But those syntax differences make a huge impact on the way you code. That makes it much more enjoyable. I highly recommend you start using ES6 on your projects. And then CSS tools, they really haven't changed. You'll want to learn a precompiler to compile your CSS down. Sass is pretty much the most popular. Less and Stylus are hanging in there. That really hasn't changed. CSS frameworks, there's still tons of them out there, but Bootstrap and Foundation remain the kind of primary ones you learn. If you learn Bootstrap, learn Foundation, and you go to any other company using any other CSS framework, you'll be fine. And then you'll want to hand code your own responsive design with CSS, which is what these frameworks do for you, but you'll kind of want to know what they do for you. So responsive design is when you change the size of your web browser window, then the website automatically resizes for you and changes the look of the website to match a mobile device or to match an iPad. So that's what responsive is. That's where Bootstrap and Foundation will save you a lot of time. And on to the JavaScript world. This is really where the change has happened. So it used to be you'd need to learn gulp and grunt as your task runners. I'm changing those to an odd color. You don't really need to learn those these days. You may come across a company that uses them, that hires you, so they're not a bad thing to be familiar with, but you don't really need to use those. If I learn one, I would learn gulp over grunt. And then you really are going to do a lot of things with Webpack these days, or even just Node.js on your actual machine. Node.js NPM scripts are just fine to get the job done in most scenarios. So I'm really not using a task runner anymore. I'm using NPM scripts with Webpack for pretty much all my projects. Browserify, again, don't really need to learn it. It's really kind of standardized around Webpack in a lot of ways. You really don't need to learn Yeoman or Bower anymore. They're cool technologies. They're fine. Yeoman is good if you're doing a whole lot of spinning up new projects, in which case Yeoman will help you boilerplate those projects out with one command. So it still has a use. It's just not as useful as it used to be, since that's not a thing a lot of people end up doing. So here's where a lot of the settling has really happened in 2016, and even in just the last few months of 2016, is in the JavaScript frameworks department. For those of you guys who don't know what these are all about, it's when you start writing single-page applications, which involve a lot of JavaScript, just hundreds and hundreds and thousands of lines, you really need a framework to help you organize that code. And so there's really four that you should be familiar with: React, Angular, Ember, Vue. If you're going to pick one, hands down, pick React. That's just the one to pick right now. And I don't even think I'm going to offend that many people by saying it, because it's kind of a standard thing. Learn React and then learn everything else. And there's other great frameworks that could totally be on this list, but I just want to keep a lot of the noise out of the way for you. Polymer's out there, still is doing fine. Aurelia is a great newer one, Aurelia, I believe. Very, very cool. But again, it's not one of the ones that I'd say you need to have in the core of your tool belt. So on the Angular side of things, Angular 2 is kind of out, and honestly, a lot of people aren't happy with how Angular 2 has kind of made this massive shift from Angular 1. Is it actually better? So many devs I know are just still using Angular 1. It's just kind of weird. It's one of the reasons React is kind of the one to pick right now. So there's just unusual things going on in the Angular world these days. And then Ember's really, really good for massive apps. It's got a really big footprint to it, but that's expected on a big app. And then Vue.js is really great for smaller, lighter apps. But also React is good for smaller, lighter React is good for smaller, lighter apps as well. But these are kind of the four to learn. Now, if you're in the React world, there was a massive amount of noise over the last year, just stuff changing every other week. Very confusing for a lot of people. Here's where some settling has happened. If you're going to build a smaller application, use React and MobX. If you're going to build a really small thing with just a module, either don't use React at all or just use vanilla React. But MobX uses the observable pattern. Super easy. It's the easiest way to get started with building out a React framework with data. And you want to learn Flux. Either way, you'll want to learn Flux because that's where a lot of these concepts for all these things kind of stemmed from. They all kind of come from Flux. I have a tutorial series on that that'll really break it down for you. Redux is great for an application that's grown and has some complex data interactions. Redux will really solve a lot of that by creating one giant store where the data all sits in it. And, well, the Redux course kind of talks about that. And then if you have really large applications, like you're going to build Gmail in React, I would use Relay for that. GraphQL is also a really great Facebook technology that you can implement into most any of these. But Relay is what you go to for huge applications that have a long life cycle. You're going to be maintaining them for a long time. And then also if you're going to just spin up a React application, create React app is a really easy way to just spin up a React application in no time. So that's the React world. Hopefully that'll help you kind of decipher all of that. And then if you want to take on something fun and something a little wacky and crazy, try ClojureScript or Elm. These are both the framework and the language. ClojureScript looks terrifying at first because it is based off of Clojure. And Elm is kind of its own language as well. And so they are both based on this functional programming concept, which is super awesome. But they will really pull you out of your box. If you're looking for something to really shake things up on the front end, ClojureScript or Elm. And then unit testing hasn't really changed. Mocha, Jasmine, Karma. Enzyme is a great library to use with any of those if you're testing React. Enzyme is really kind of, I think, the best React testing framework. And that's kind of front end. So if that freaked you out, here's what you do. You're coming into the front end developer stream as a basic HTML, CSS developer. Learn how to precompile Sass. That won't take you hardly any time at all. Learn a CSS framework. And then when you're confident with those things, start to learn a JavaScript framework. You don't learn them all, pick React, and then just start learning more every year. That's kind of how it is. You don't have to freak out seeing all this stuff. You don't have to learn it all. So let's go backend. What do you do on the backend? I want to be a backend developer. Well, I tried to clean this up a lot since there is so much more going on in the backend, so much more happening that I tried to kind of group stuff for you. There's scripting languages, functional languages, and high-performance compiled languages. And you basically, if you're looking for something to learn as a beginner to backend, learn a scripting language. Pick one of these. These are kind of the best entry point, and they're kind of some of the most popular as far as jobs go. So if I'm going to recommend one, I'm going to say Node.js for several reasons. One, you probably already know some JavaScript, and Node.js is just awesome. It's getting more and more popular all the time, used by every size of company across the board. So Node.js is great. And then I also put in parentheses kind of the frameworks that you'll use with these languages, because this is the language. In the parentheses are the frameworks, the most popular ones to pick. Anything with a caret mark, that little up caret mark, that means it's a micro framework. Micro frameworks are kind of the easiest ones to start with. They're much simpler. So Node.js, Python, Ruby, and PHP are definitely the scripting languages to choose from. And then if you're looking to level up, if you're looking to challenge yourself, stretch yourself, don't pick a second scripting language. Pick something that's of a different paradigm, either a functional language or more of a high-performance / compiled world. So if you know Node already, don't go and move over to Python. Go to something over here on the functional languages. It will completely challenge and stretch the way you think about coding and development and engineering. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. If you're looking for a way to level up, pick something of a different paradigm. If I were to take absolutely my picks, I'd go Node.js, I'd go Haskell, and I would go Golang or Rust. And then I kind of did the odd color on Java and C#. And I get a lot of flack for this. Hey, why wouldn't you tell me to learn Java? There's tons of Java jobs. Why wouldn't you tell me to learn C#, .NET? I just think that they're going to put you maybe into a world that's not very good for beginners. If you're coming out of this world, there's no issue with being in there. But believe me, after having so many friend developers who have been in the Java C# world, it's very enterprisey. There's tons of opportunity in those areas. But I would just encourage new people to go with a scripting language, then add something else on top of that. So that's kind of my 2 cents on there. That's mostly experience and experience with other developers, and the stuff that's the horror stories I have heard is what's kind of driving that recommendation. So what do you do once you pick that language? I want to learn a language. How do you actually kind of absorb that language and become good at it? Well, first off, here's kind of the things you want to learn in a language. No matter what language you pick, how do you test it? How do you do unit and functional tests? How do you build an API for it? How do you build a RESTful API in Node.js or in Python? How do you handle security, authorization? How do I do JWT, JSON Web Token, JWT authentication in Python? How do I do OAuth 2? These are basically the questions you're going to ask yourself. Is there a common deployment platform for that? You know, if you're doing Ruby, Capistrano is the most popular thing you use to deploy a Ruby app. Or you'll use Flight Plan or something like that for Node.js or Fabric for Python. So how do you deploy this application? Is there any popular ORM in the language? ORM is basically how you manage your objects and the way they will save and fetch from the database. So it kind of gives you a code representation of the database. Is there a popular ORM for your data? And then you'll want to just learn how to tie that into different databases. Now there are, oh my goodness, dozens and dozens of databases, so many good for so many different reasons. At the end of the day, start with the relational database if you're not comfortable with them. You'll want to learn MySQL first, then learn how Postgres has better features than MySQL. Lots of people still use MySQL because they don't need those features, but learn a relational database first. The next thing I would learn would be to learn Redis for sessions and caching. Learn how to cache your queries to a database in Redis. And then, have fun. Learn a document or a NoSQL database. MongoDB is still the most popular one, even though a lot of people gripe about it. Couchbase and RethinkDB are 2 super cool ones. And then learn a search engine database. Elasticsearch or Solr, super cool. Learn how, to use a database tuned for search engines. And then you also want to learn caching. How do I cache in Nginx? How do I cache in Apache if I'm using that? How do I do a database level caching, which is of course Redis right here, or an in-memory cache even is useful sometimes. So that's kind of backend. That's the recommendations I'd have for the backend world in 2016. And then if you have been in backend for a long time and you're really looking to challenge yourself, look at DevOps. DevOps is how you do super cool workflows with backend. Let me see if I can get rid of this. How can I get rid of this? Just a second here. Got to move backend over and pull DevOps in. Okay, there we go. So DevOps, here's kind of the things you want to learn. I used to have a ton of web platforms up here, and I'm just kind of standardizing around the 4 most popular. DigitalOcean is great for practicing things. You can spin up servers and spin them down in no time. They're extremely cheap. Although if I was going to do anything on professional scale, I would pick AWS personally. Azure and Rackspace, also totally cool. I'm pretty much, if you're going to learn DigitalOcean and AWS. Heroku, it's its own animal. It gets expensive as you scale it. It works really good for small projects. It's just its own animal. It's a good thing for everyone to look at some point in time, just to know their paradigm, and then to try to recreate that experience with your other stuff. And then Docker is something you're absolutely going to want to know. This is Docker right here. If you're going to learn one technology to expand your DevOps stuff, learn Docker. If you don't know it, if you know it a little bit, learn it well. Docker is where stuff is going. Containerizing and containerization is really where stuff is going, and Docker is the technology to learn in that field right now. So if you want to do Docker on a big scale, enterprise level, Kubernetes is the one that over and over again just keeps coming up. Kubernetes is not going away anytime soon. It's a great technology. Mesos is another really good just platform for running Docker stuff. If you're doing smaller scale Docker, you can either use Docker Swarm, or Docker's new 1.12 version has its own swarming capabilities that don't offer a lot, but for small scale stuff will keep things extremely simple for you. And then if you're looking for a good UI, if you want to really manage Docker with a great graphical user interface, Rancher is my favorite. Love deploying Docker apps with Rancher. Docker Cloud is a very similar Rancher as a service type of thing. You basically, you use the Docker Cloud service. It's very similar to Rancher, although I do think Rancher is much more featureful. Docker Data Center, Universal Control Plane, that's the same product or two pieces of one product. That's kind of if you're looking to do a local enterprise installation, although Rancher you install on your own hardware as well. That's kind of what I like about Rancher a lot. You install it on your own machines, on your own infrastructure. Docker Data Center is really kind of Docker Cloud with enterprise level features that you also run on your own hardware. So that's kind of, if you're going to look at anything in the Docker world, look at this set of stuff. Docker's awesome. I did just come out with an O'Reilly course on Docker called Real World Docker, where I kind of really take you, if you know the basics, you can take the course and it'll take you through a lot of kind of the fundamentals of Docker, and you'll be comfortable moving into most of any of these things because you kind of know the fundamentals. Again, it's called Real World Docker. It's a course with O'Reilly Publishers, the Animal Book people. And then you'll also want to learn continuous testing and deployment. Jenkins is a continuous testing platform that runs on your own hardware. And then there's stuff like Semaphore CI, Circle CI, CodeShip. What else is out there? Travis. There's just so many CI places that'll get real-time testing and deployment on your stuff. It is definitely, to me, old school feeling to have to run a deployment command to get your code to production. Merge it to master. Have it go to production as soon as you merge to master. Merge it to a staging branch to get it on staging and let CI take care of the rest of that for you. If I had to take my pick, Semaphore CI is extremely fast. You can get a build, a test, a deployment out in like 30 seconds. Semaphore is extremely fast, extremely simple to use. Circle CI and CodeShip are also great. So these are kind of my favorites these days. Vagrant, I gave this the odd color because you really don't need to know Vagrant anymore. Docker is really, in my opinion, the replacement for Vagrant. It's a good thing to be aware of in case you were to come across a legacy application that used Vagrant, but I think Docker is the thing to learn. And then if you do want to learn any kind of enterprise level configuration management, learn Ansible, Docker, and of course you got to know Linux to do that. Salt, Chef, Puppet, I've made those the odd color because that type of thing is not as much where things are going. Everything's going containerization. And Docker is your provisioning, server management, configuration management for most situations. So that's kind of the 2016-2017 web world in a nutshell. That's what you got. That's what you want to learn. I hope you enjoyed this. Feel free to comment with any questions. I'll try to answer everything I can, especially during the first weeks of this video being live. And have yourself a great web development year.